Welcome back, fellow gamers. So today I want to detail my deck tech for Yisan the Wanderer Bard. I've been calling him the Wandering Bard this whole time. Just realized that as I read it. Anyways, this is the deck that I ran during the Grand Prix Montreal with the goal of winning games, taking names, and cracking skulls. So I'll give it to high level on most of the key cards. How I built this deck was I knew I wanted to use Yisan, and then I go to EDH Rec and I look at some of the popular cards that are built with him in mind, and then I look at other cards that I have in the collection of the cards that I own and see what else can slot in. So there are a few Yisan the Wanderer Bard. I'm gonna have to get used to that. Deck lists out there, and they're pretty much similar. They revolve around getting to 8 counters and then bringing out Crater Hoof Behemoth. You can also stall the game in a different way to help, I guess, force people to quit or just make their board states unplayable. Essentially, you'll want to play Yisan if you like consistency, if you don't mind the games looking very similar, you like having the answers to a lot of different board states, and furthermore, if you don't mind being viewed as the threat at the table. I feel that the cat's out of the bag for Yisan players. People now know what a threat he is, and he's dealt with almost immediately. At the Grand Prix, during my first game, 2 of the players knew exactly what Yisan was capable of, and I had to hard cast for 9 mana at one point that eventually won me the game, so I'm okay. If you have watched my Grand Prix video, you know that I actually only played 2 games. And it wasn't because I wasn't having fun with Yisan and just the money that I was going to be sinking into it. I plan on spending about $200 on, playing about 10 games. Anyways, so Yisan, obviously in general. The idea here is I'm going to run through pretty much each of my piles. I'll start with the mana base. The mana base is fairly important. So I do have my land destruction in Strip Mine Wasteland. I have some, I have Cavernous Souls in here so that I name human, and when I do cast him, he's not going to be countered. So if I'm playing in blue decks that run a lot of counter spells, this will save the day. Ancient Tomb is a great mana accelerator. I usually use Thespian Sage to copy a card like this, a non-legendary land. Same with Vesuva, right? Regenerate creature, so if somebody wants to, if I'm completely open and I don't have anything to help save Yisan, definitely regenerate is great. Obviously doesn't protect against exile and tux, but regenerate nonetheless is a great thing to have. Command Beacon, if I have this on the board and it gets to the point where Yisan just doesn't make any sense to cast him for 9 or 11 mana, it's great to have this to just put into your hand and then cast him for 3. I only have 2 fetches in this deck because I don't have the other fetch lands for some reason. I went looking at my collection and I actually don't have them, so these are the 2 fetch lands I do have, and I use them to go get forests. Guys, Cradle, obviously almost an auto-include in each green deck. Help your mana state or your land state out. Same thing with Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx. Especially here when you have a lot of permanents out that have that green mana symbol and you're tapping it for green, you're good. And then again, afterwards it's forests. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'm only running 23 basics, but then combined with all this, you'll have yourself a nice pretty mana base. It's not as mana intensive as a lot of EDH decks are, or Commander decks, whichever you want to call it, but this gets the job done. I don't feel like I've ever really been short of mana, and I've won games where I've had no lands on the table. And just, it's not a very mana intensive deck in the sense that you need the lands. You will get mana dorks and other mana supplies elsewhere. And that kind of brings me to this deck, so I'm not too sure if I'm going to keep this card in a future build. So Burgeonings, whenever any opponent plays a land, card for you can put one onto the battlefield from your hand. So I do have ways of bouncing lands to my hand in order to untap Yisan, so you can definitely, if you have a few lands, go that route. And I have some more mana accelerators here. Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, Mox, Those are kind of auto includes also in a lot of decks. So that's it for my mana accelerators. Next, we'll jump into the creatures. I'll move Yisan here since he doesn't really need to be front and center anymore. We know what we're talking about, right? So Asuza, Lost But Seeking, again, if you're bouncing a lot of lands back to your hand and you're stuck with a few lands, you can throw them down. Sakura Tribe Scout, again, you're you're putting a land card from your hand into play. So some consistency there with Burgeoning, Asuza, and Sakura. And then you have Launor Elves, Boreal Druid, Birds of Paradise, Finhorn Elves, Elvish Archdruid, Elvish Mystic, Priest of Titania, Arbor Elf, Karametra's Alkalites. These are pretty much our mana dorks. Move that out of the way. Try to get extra mana from there, floating around. So the goal here is, I always try to play Yisan turn 1, hopefully or if things aren't going as planned, turn 2. If I can't play Yisan on turn 1 or 2, I mulligan my hand till I get something that I can. The lowest I've ever gone is 4 cards. So I've gone down to 4 cards, and I still end up normally winning the game. And I played a lot, so I did only play 2 games at Grand Prix Montreal, but I tested this deck out heavily against friends. And I think I might have lost 2 games total ever with Yisan before the Grand Prix Montreal. So I did lose 1-1-1 in Montreal, so it brings my losses to 3. But that's pretty good for the amount of Commander I play. That's not bad. And here we have the untapping effects I was talking about. So Wirewood Symbiote, Quirion Ranger, Scrib Ranger are the 3 major untap effects that I would have, plus obviously Seedborn Muse. And one thing to note, don't forget that Seedborn Muse untaps all permanents you control during each player's untap steps. A lot of people get it confused and think it's only creatures and lands, because that was what Prophet of Krufix did. So again, this here it's returning an elf, returning a forest, and then here returning a forest. One thing to note out of these 3 is that you can only use their ability once per turn. But the beauty here is, let's say you use Wirewood Symbiote and you bounce Quirion Ranger and then you play her again, you can then reuse her ability again. So that's pretty awesome, because now you've gotten 2 out. Obviously you have to find another way to bouncing this back to your hand, which is available through Tamir Sabertooth. I use this to try to get these guys to off the board and back onto the table. Also, Tamir Sabertooth is great for bringing certain cards that you want back to your hand. So if there's a Wrath on the board and you have them on mana floating, usually I'll bring Yisan and a few others like Seedborn Muse back to my hand, because I don't want to lose the non-general permanents that are, or creatures rather, that are on the battlefield, and put them into the graveyard. So that's where I'm coming from with this. This is such a versatile card. And a lot of people overlook it. There's actually infinite combos within this deck that makes this here such a huge piece of the pie. Then we have some removal. So whether it's creature or artifact, this here obviously Duplicant is great at exiling indestructibles or just creatures that might be too large for you to actually hit. These are my removal spells, obviously Duplicant, Caustic Caterpillar, Reclamation Sage, and Bane of Progress. This one hitting all artifacts and enchantments. Same thing, hitting destroying a target artifact or enchantment. And this is a great combo piece with something like this or this. So if that person has it, you're not drawing something that has mass removal in terms of artifacts or enchantments. Use one of these to bounce this to your hand and then play it again. you have pretty much on-demand removal for artifacts and enchantments. Regal Force is great for a card draw. I really haven't needed it. Every time I've drawn it in my hand, I've not ended up playing with it, so I don't know if this might get the boot one day. We'll see. Woodland Bellower, Fierce Empath are great tutor abilities, so this is great to grab certain either combo pieces or, you know, as a ability to help finish off the game with a guy like Shaman of the Forgotten Ways, which I'll get to in a few moments. But this, again, if you want to search for your answer, especially this Fierce Empath, if you absolutely can't wait to get Yisan to 6 counters, you just go ahead and get your duplicate and then play it if you have the mana. Get rid of that threat. These are my 3 protection cards. He's usually the guy I go get with my first counter on Yisan. So sacrificing a land to give a creature Shroud for the rest of the turn, you know, causes one of the spells to fizzle, and then not only that, it allows you to protect Yisan for that extra turn. I have found myself using this card to the point where I have no more lands on the battlefield. That's not really ever a problem for me. Soul New Phyrexia, protecting against board wipes is great, and Phyrexian Revoker really just locking down certain cards or planeswalkers that might be of worry to you. Then I try to get my recursion if ever I need it with Eternal Witness. Playing Flash is always a good thing, especially if you're bouncing creatures to your hand and you have a Seedborn Muse on the battlefield. Playing them on the opponent's turn is always a great surprise. This is pretty much a graveyard hate card, so anything that's running the graveyard base combo, I'll just pay that 1 green and bounce it out of there. And then this here is one of my favorite combos, and a combo that a lot of people actually don't like. So I'm turning a land into a 1/1 creature, and then I'm paying the 2 to deal 1 damage to target creature. So it's a 3 mana recurring land removal, spot land removal. So if there's problem lands like an opponent's Guy's Cradle or a Maze of Ith, you're able to ding these guys, get them out. And also the finishing ability, if you actually like, you need the extra +3/+3 on your creatures, and if there's a lot of blockers, giving them trample is relevant as a late game option. So these 2 here, Elvish Visionary, again, part of a combo piece where I'll bounce this to my hand, play it again, draw a card, so it allows me to start drawing a lot. This will help get my enchantment removal, Lignify. So it allows you to search for a Tree Folk or Forest card. I'm usually searching for this Tree Folk here. I'll explain in detail what I try to use that for. Turn 7, it's usually always this card that comes into play, getting that 2/2 +4 1/1 Death Touch. You can't really argue with that, especially if you're up against some dragons or angels that are not indestructible. This here will usually put a stop to people's constant attacks. And with all this out, I like to then play Crater Hoof Behemoth, so now you've actually boosted up all your extra guys +5/+5. And this is my finisher card. I haven't lost a game after I cast Crater Hoof Behemoth. Once you get it out, it gives everything +X/+X, where X is the number of creatures you control. Can't really argue with that. Either way, if this is on the battlefield, then I just tap this for its formidable cost, which is 11, and each player's life total becomes the number of creatures he or she controls. So you can only activate if you control a creature that has a total power of 8 or greater, and as soon as this hits, you will have that, unless your game state is going really bad. But other than that, I usually tap that, brings my life down to probably about 10 to 15. It'll bring somebody else's life down to usually 6, 5, 2 if I'm lucky, and then just attack. It allows you to not attack with everything, so that you can keep something open in case somebody has some sort of pillow fort going on where you're actually not getting to do your damage. Now, I guess I'll go to some more removal here. So Lignify, again, turning a creature into a 0/4 that loses all abilities is quite relevant. Same thing with Song of the Dryads, turning it into a forest, getting rid of a general, a planeswalker, anything is great with this. And then here's my other removal. So, Nature's Claim, Natural State, 2 great cards. The trade-off getting 74 life really is pretty much never relevant. Like that extra 4 life isn't going to save them. And for keeping only 1 mana open, you're good to go here. And then this is actually relevant as well. 1 mana again. A lot of the artifacts or enchantments that cause problems for this deck cost 3 or less. So like an Oblivion Ring or some sort of like, I don't know. Pretty much Oblivion Ring is the only one I've run into where I need to use this against. But if somebody has a equipment or something that you want off the board, you're good to go. And then this here, if you're not really ready to attack and you want to hit like a planeswalker or pretty much anything really, this is good to go. Giving you an extra 3/3, not really a problem for me. And what I like to do is I like to slow the board up so I can get set up and get ready to go. Since I'm not using a lot of lands, these types of cards are really good in the sense that they hit lands most of the time. So I'm not really needing to worry about my lands or untapping lands. I'm gonna have to change this plastic. It's getting ruined. I've had these plastics for quite a while, so the fact that they're not really in that great shape anymore is okay. So, the famous Winter Orb. As long as Winter Orb is untapped, players can't untap more than one land during their untap steps. And this is great, especially as Seaboard Muse, because it bypasses that on the opponent's untap steps, so you're good to go there. Players cannot activate artifact abilities, record an activation cost. I do end up losing my mana rocks to that, but that's fine. I don't really mind it. I play it by ear. Sometimes it just stays in my hand. Tangle Wire is a fun one, and it's at the beginning of each player's upkeep that player taps an untapped artifact, creature, or land he or she controls. So that really taps players' boards down for a few turns. Non-creature spells cost 1 more to play. I don't run that many, and the ones I do run are fairly cheap, so paying the extra 1 isn't a big deal. But somebody trying to play like a time stretch or playing Omniscience, Doomblade, it really starts affecting their game state. And then, for the aforementioned Doomblade, as long as Trinity Sphere is untapped, each spell that would cost less than 3 mana to play costs 3 mana. There you go. Helps the board stay. And I will say, this hasn't been really relevant in my playtesting. Like I said, I've had this in my hand where I haven't used it because I've had so much artifact action going on that I didn't want to use it. So if I do build this deck again, I might actually just take this stuff out and replace it with stuff that can protect my general better. And speaking of protection, so my protection really relies on these 2 cards. Countering an instant aura spell that targets a permanent you control is great, especially with pacifism and like that. If that is in your play group, that's a really good card. And then Vines of Vastwood. Paying 2 green or 1 green if you just really want to give it the Shroud effect. But giving it the +4/+4 is relevant, especially if somebody's playing like Toxic Deluge or Black Sun Zenith. Boosting them up so that you can get a bit of extra action on that turn is always a good idea. Here we're starting to get into the random mishmash of cards. This here is a combo piece where if you can technically float enough mana that you have infinite mana so that you can do pretty much whatever you want on this. So, paying your 3 to untap target creature, obviously Yisan, this having been tapped, you pay an extra 1 to untap it. You're floating around. It's not that complicated of a infinite combo as long as you have Karametra's Alkalite or something like Gaia's Cradle that produces a lot of mana so that you can do a single untap on it is pretty good, especially here when you're tapping or untapping target creature. If that target creature is Karametra's Acolyte and you just can go infinite by just pouring more mana into your mana pool with each untap and tap, you're good to go. And then I have, a tutor here. I think I have a Worldly Tutor as my other tutor to go get stuff that I might need in an emergency. So if somebody's running out of control and I need, again, Duplicant or a Hornet Queen or anything, like that's usually the go-to method. Sylvan Library, Sensei's Divine top deck manipulation is where it's at. Controlling the fact of if there's one of the creatures that I want to fetch with Yisan and he's coming up on the draw, then I can just put him a few cards below so that I don't draw the card. And for the unfortunate instances where I can't protect certain cards, Regrowth has come in handy. I will not knock it. And then finally here, these are kind of like the untap effects. Umbral Mantle, so one of my kind of like combo EDH cards that I had detailed as being an awesome piece is here again. If you have, again, infinite mana and you're able to boost a person up almost infinite or, kind of give it to your whole team, if you have infinite mana, that's a great way of going about it too. You don't necessarily need to go get Critter of Behemoth if you're able to boost a guy up tremendously and then just attack with them. And these 2 cards, so Quest for Renewal, it acts as a Seaboard Muse where you can untap all creatures you control during each player's untap steps as long as it has 4. I believe it's 4. If you can, there are 4. Yeah, if there are 4 more quest counters on it, you can do that. And Vitalize in a pinch. If let's say you've attacked with everything and your attack didn't go through, you left 1 mana open. First of all, good for you for leaving the mana open. And then casting this, so as a surprise block, is great. Also, if you want to continue a combo chain and you have that There you go. So that's kind of the run through my deck. I don't know how much time we are. Let me just have a look here. About 22 minutes. I'm going to try to speed that up in post. But that's my Yisan deck. That's the deck I ran with. I would love to know what your builds were and what you thought worked and what you didn't, what you would cut from my deck. I'm always open for opinions, or maybe there's a card I've overlooked that has done great work for you. Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear about it. And thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. And don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. If you'd like to see more, click on one of the 2 videos that are there, or click on show more in the description below to see when and what we upload, as well as when we stream. And if you need an update on what exactly we're going to be streaming that week, don't be shy to hit us up in the comments or reach out to us on Twitter. We'll be more than happy to chat. Until next time, good gaming.